Hey, 555ers, Andrew here. Hope you're doing great. I sure am. I'm coming to you from what could probably be described as my happy place. I am at my family cabin on the Whitefish Chain, and normally these trips are just for leisure and for relaxation, and I don't make YouTube videos unless I really feel like it. And I really feel like it because I have something very special inside of this little satchel. Yeah, guys, we're going to be talking about my favorite type of watches today, the field watch. And we've got some proper ones today. In addition to my Tudor Ranger, which I am wearing today, I've also got TGV's Rolex Explorer. Yes, his very Explorer. He was very gracious in sending it to me after I let him check out my blue Alpinist and my green Alpinist. In this video, we're going to be talking about what is surely the darling of the YouTuber sports watches, the Rolex Explorer in 36mm. And we're going to be looking at two other watches that in some ways I think are very nice to compare to it, the Tudor Ranger and my Rolex Air-King 1400 series. So it should just be a fun, casual video. If you want a technical, detailed, in-depth look at these watches, this isn't for you. But if you just want to hear my inside thoughts on these watches, which have certainly been very influential not only on my channel, but on many YouTubers' channels, then stay tuned. It's going to be a nice inside look at some beautiful watches. All right, let's get right into it. What we have from left to right is a 1400 series Rolex. I believe this one is from '98, running the caliber 3000 movement. This is TGV's Explorer, and what a beauty, what a fine watch. Let's just get a closer look at this beautiful Explorer. This is the 114270, the second generation of the 36mm Explorer with the modern applied indices, running the 3130 movement, coming in of course at 36mm with the 20mm lugs compared to 34mm and 19mm lugs in the Air-King here. And then finally we have the Tudor Ranger here, a watch that I've really been enjoying, wearing a lot, especially this weekend here at the cabin. The Ranger, of course, is much larger, coming in at 41mm with the 22mm lugs, and the beautiful vintage dial, vintage style dial with the painted indices, with the beautiful old school Arabics, and the spade hand. Three interesting watches. I thought that you guys would enjoy, frankly, looking at the watches that interest me the most these days. Simple stainless steel watches from venerable brands, running no date dials and automatic movements. It's amazing how a long time making videos doesn't make this style of watch any less appealing, but maybe more appealing. And the reason why these watches are a personal interest to me to share with you today is because frankly I'm thinking about consolidating these two watches for this one. But it's a tough decision, and I thought I would just talk a little bit about that. So we'll talk about the merits of these different watches in this conversation, as well as some of the setbacks and challenges, and maybe the reason why for me it just seems like the Rolex Explorer, especially in 36mm, just has a gravitational force that is not going away. I keep coming back to this watch, and I'm so excited that Tristano was able to give me this watch to check out today. So of course the perennial appeal of the sports watch from Rolex is just the versatility, and you know, I've really enjoyed the Air-King for its surprising versatility. It really flies under the radar. Fits under a cuff great. Wears larger than its 34 millimeters, and that's the thing that's interesting, is that side by side I've definitely had a number of friends who are collectors just ask me, looking at pictures, if I'm actually wearing an Explorer, because the 2 millimeters of difference are not nearly as noticeable. Of course, there's a bit of a difference in the lug length, and that's where I feel like you really notice the difference. Thickness wise though, they are surprisingly similar. Just notice the larger crown on the Explorer, not necessarily a thicker crown, but just a wider crown, and that is nice to wear. Tristano sent me this on his Colareb strap, so I don't have the Oyster bracelets to compare, but they're probably very similar, just with that millimeter of difference. And to be honest, the main appeal for the Explorer over the Air-King is just simply the story, the provenance. And now, of course, I'm talking about the provenance of the watch being worn on Everest and all of that. We know that story. Perhaps for me, the even more personal story of provenance is just that the Rolex Explorer has always been a watch that I've really admired, and has also been one of the key watches to bring success to my channel. One of 2 videos over 1 million views features a Rolex Explorer, the newer 39 millimeter version, the T-Rex version, the first version of the 39 millimeter Explorer with the solid gold indices and smaller hands. Right now, I have to admit, I'm kind of torn. I could consolidate these 2 watches straight away and get a 36 millimeter and probably be very happy with it. But I really love the 39 millimeter, the current Mark II version of the 39 millimeter with the new movement and loomed indices, which I do find that I miss, as you can see on this 36 millimeter version. The loom is not bad, but it's nothing memorable. Even in comparison, the Ranger has a much superior loom, and the Ranger is really an interesting watch that I've puzzled over. In the end, what it is a beautiful homage writ large in modern oversized style, and so in that respect it is truly a perfect weekend watch. You have less investment to worry about too when it's on your wrist, but you have a lot of real estate even with its relatively modest lug length. I believe this is 48 millimeters lug to lug. It wears large with the big dial, and don't get me wrong, it is a stunning dial. It is a beautiful dial with the subtle depth in the indices, the red hand, the simple 4 lines of text, the rose logo. There's just so much to love about the Ranger. I do feel that it is really undersold and underrated in the Tudor lineup. Probably for the obvious reason though, which is just look at the size here. There is a real difference in size that makes this watch even hard to wear on my 7 1/4 inch wrist compared to the Explorer. And so one of the appeals of this simple 3-handed sports watch is versatility, and in that fundamental way I feel like the Ranger just doesn't rise to the occasion the way the Explorer so famously and so truly does. I mean, this watch really does soar above so many sports watches in terms of the way that it can just fit in every situation, especially on its Oyster. I feel like this 36 millimeter Explorer could be worn for practically every occasion without fault. And of course, with this modern Rolex movement, it does a beautiful job with that in terms of reliability, shock resistance, a decent power reserve. It really is a fantastic watch all around. And it seems to me that the 36 millimeter Rolex's values are probably going to continue to rise, as we've seen. In fact, all of Rolex's values have seemed to have been very steady, and none of these watches you seem to stand to lose any investment on. But it is just a question of consolidation for me, and what is going to net the highest level of enjoyment, and that is a very difficult question. Let's look at these watches on the wrist. So of course, here we have the Rolex Air-King on my 7 1/4 inch wrist. Stands very tall for its small 34 millimeter size, especially thanks to that oversized crystal. Just notice the thickness of that crystal, especially in comparison to the Rolex Explorer, which I'll show you in a little bit. This watch is really just about comfort and versatility and a touch of formality with those stick indices. Wears beautifully, wears larger than its 34 millimeter size indicates, but still, nevertheless, really does wear small. And I think that the biggest challenge with the Air-King for me as a collector is just that the Air-King line seems kind of lost. Seems to have lost its way. Never seems to have had the place that the Explorer does in the world of horology. And as much as I'm enjoying this watch, another thing that bothers me is the simple folding clasp. Admittedly easy to adjust and comfortable, but it has come loose a couple times unexpectedly. It's not the most amazing feat of engineering, and so the prospects of especially getting a modern Rolex clasp on the latest Explorer greatly interests me. So I do love this watch. It's an excellent and slept-on model. Black dial stainless steel Rolexes are always going to be a classic, but compared to the Explorer, it is a tough sell. Except for price, and that's one thing that I want to mention, is that the value on this thing is considerably better right now. These are trading around $2,500 in good condition, and mine is in average condition for sure, unapologetically unpolished, and you know, I don't mind it that way. Here's the Explorer on the wrist, and as you can see, the big difference is in the lug to lug. Those longish, kind of rakish lugs definitely give it a slightly more confident feel. The bezel is slightly wider. The crystal is slightly flatter and more recessed in the case, and so it doesn't really wear any larger than the Air-King, and it definitely wears flatter on the wrist. And that is one thing that I do definitely prefer about this watch in comparison to the Air-King, is it seems to just wear a little bit more proportionately for my 7¼ inch wrists. I don't know though. I think the 39 millimeter would look really good on this wrist as well. It's a tough decision. They're both so nice, and I definitely understand the appeal of the 36 millimeter as having its own merits at this size, especially in terms of versatility. It's just such a gorgeous, understated size. And of course we have the Ranger here on the wrist, which you've seen before, of course, on the channel. Now I'm running it on a tan OEM strap from Tudor. Beautiful, beautiful weave strap. Easily the best watch of the bunch on the strap. Also, and this might be a little controversial, easily the best dial in my opinion, simply speaking. Just the cleanest design, beautiful indices, beautiful typesetting. The Rolex Explorer does get a little busy in my opinion with its 5 lines of text. Ranger avoids this, of course, with the smiley self-winding. Very charming. Big crystal, dome crystal, thick on the wrist. Love this watch. As you can see from this angle, the size does seem to impact how it looks. Even with the short lugs, it's hanging off my wrist. Not in fact hanging off my wrist, of course. Notice that at the right angle it seems to fit quite nicely, but just wears like an oversized watch. It's so frustrating. As much as I love this watch in its size, I just wish it was a couple millimeters smaller. It would just wear better, just wear more comfortably. Not that it's an uncomfortable watch at all, and not that the average size watch is everyone's taste, but for me, this is a great watch that is so close to being legendary. So let's just touch on one more time what I like about each of these watches, some of the things that I don't like, and then I'll just talk about where I'm at in terms of my own journey as a collector. So of course the Air-King is the best value here. It still is very versatile, even though it is a little dressier. Love the simple old school oyster bracelet, although it does have its limitations. The clasp is disappointing to me. You know, one of the things that I love about the dial actually here that I haven't mentioned is that beautiful applied Rolex crown. Definitely a show stealer in comparison to the Rolex's kind of modest crown here. But beyond that, I mean, the dial that is of more interest to me is for sure the Explorer, with the beautiful and modern, but yet nonetheless has aged really well, 369 on the dial, and of course the Mercedes hands are so perfect. It's hard to really argue against Mercedes hands, isn't it? Better size too, better lug-to-lug length. I also prefer the crown on the Explorer. Between the two, I'd say I prefer the Explorer overall. But the Ranger is another interesting third contender in this. Call it a battle, call it a comparison. Really, it's just a sibling rivalry, I guess. Coming in at a more youthful, bold size, got the pierced lugs, got the beautiful painted dials I've talked about, comes with the best strap of the bunch by far. It's tough to say which one is really the best overall. It is somewhat a matter of taste. The Explorer, however, though, really is heads and shoulders above when it comes to provenance, and that is a major thing to consider as a collector in the long term. So yeah, guys, I'm going to just wrap this up on my phone since my camera died. And vacation rules, the show must go on. I'm not stressing out. It gives you a chance to look at these two watches under a different lens. It's just a question of consolidation. In the end, for me, it's just a question of consolidation. You know, is it worth it to go from two solid watches to one watch, which is certainly technically and from a collector's standpoint a superior watch, even though the two watches you'd be consolidating are perfectly good? It's a tough question, and there's definitely sacrifices that have to be made in order to finally get the answer that I'm looking for. Big thanks to TGV for sending out his beloved Explorer. I completely understand the passion for it. In fact, I'm right there, so close to finally pulling the trigger on my own Explorer. And I have to decide whether it's going to be this one or the 39mm Explorer. What do you think, guys? Which one would I be happier with in the long term? I'd be curious to hear. I'd say my biggest concern about the 39 is just that it might be too large, believe it or not. So Rolex, if you're watching, how about a 38mm Explorer? Or maybe 40mm even. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap things up. I've got some fishing to do. Make sure to leave me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Thanks again for joining me at my family cabin. Hope you enjoyed this relaxing comparison. Life's good. Happy to share some of my personal thoughts as a collector. If you're new to the channel here and you're curious about what else I've got in store, it's lots of good gear and watch reviews. Bring my personal perspective as an enthusiast as well as a reviewer. Thanks a lot, guys. Hope your Memorial Day weekend is going great, and I will see you in the next video.
As always, have a lot.